Alright, before we do anything, read this. There we go. Have I got your hopes down? Cool, let's get started. Okay, you may have guessed that this isn't a biology video based on the fact that it says so in the description and in the title. If you didn't work that out, you might want to leave now. This video requires you to think a little bit. Did they leave? Okay, cool. Yeah, so as well as biology, I'm failing a course in psychology at A level. This is still for my benefit, but hey, at least I can help imaginary people with this series as well. This is kind of directed towards people who are doing A-level psychology, so if you're not interested in how the brain works, first of all, what's wrong with you? And secondly, you may as well just leave now. Actually, could you do me a solid and just mute it and then open a new tab? I need viewer retention. Okay, so that leaves people who are actually interested in psychology. Start the lo-fi beats to study/work to. It's time for the worst possible way to revise, General Shrug. Right, so let's see what we've got for our first episode of psychology. Oh, Christ. I'm really going to have to stick to the syllabus with this one. The comment section is going to be inundated by people with Pepe profile pictures shouting about how there are only two genders and how they identify as an Apache helicopter, and then there's going to be the people with Steven Universe profile pictures saying it's a spectrum. Oh, for fuck's sake, why did I pick this one? Just to address both of these groups, this is the internet. No one gives a shit about your opinion. We're just distracting ourselves from the inevitability of our death, so don't spend the limited time you have on this insignificant planet trying to convince other people that you're right. Anyway, now that I'm done wasting my time on this insignificant planet trying to convince other people that I'm right, let's get back to the subject at hand. So, topics. We have how we learn gender stereotypes and characteristics, the concept of androgyny, the role of biological factors in sex and gender determination, psychological explanations of gender development, the utter bullshit area that is the psychodynamic approach, the cognitive approach to gender development, and atypical gender development. So, yeah, quite a few things. Oh, before we carry on, I'll just have a couple of definitions. Sex is the biological status of a person, so male or female. It's determined by your chromosomes, either XX for females or XY for men. I mean, there are some deviations from these that I'll get to later, but never mind. Gender is the psychosocial concept and the identity of the individual. Actually, you libtard, there's actually no difference between... Oh, go fuck yourself! So, gender is able to change, unlike sex. Okay, you got that? Cool, let's get this over with already. So, sex role stereotypes. I'll just keep it to the official ones. I'll keep my own hatred for women out of it. So, we learn these from outside sources. Obviously, this can happen either explicitly or implicitly. So, for instance, when your mum says something like, boys don't cry when you scrape your knee, or when she snaps your hamster's neck in front of you, that's an explicit version of teaching. But then you can also learn it implicitly by imitating the models. So in this example, it would be not crying at the time and then only letting out your emotions in a YouTube video like 8 years later. So then along came... Sorry about that, it's a reflex. Along came Sandra Bem with her BSRI, or Bem Sex Role Inventory, which is a scale to determine how many masculine or feminine attributes an individual exhibits. Test subjects are asked to rate themselves on a 7-point scale based on how much they identify with certain traits. So 20 of the given traits are masculine, 20 were feminine, and the remaining 20 were just fillers. So if you rated yourself 6s and 7s for masculine traits like independent or ambitious, you'd be classified as masculine. But the same applies for femininity. 6s and 7s on things like compassionate and affectionate would make you feminine. But what about the people who have high scores for both sides of the scale? Well, they're a whole new breed of person called androgynous. So androgynous was suggested as an exception to the other two definitions by mixing aspects of both. Bem suggested that these people were more psychologically healthy because they're less likely to adhere to stereotypes, so they're free to be their own person. This is supported by evidence as well. Prakash et al. Tested 100 married women in India, and those with more androgynous scores had lower scores for depression, stress, anxiety, and even physical health issues. This is good for Bem's theory of androgyny being good for mental health, but it doesn't really support for the BSRI. Prakash used the personal attribute scale instead. That's not the BSRI. In fact, while we're shitting on the BSRI, let's talk about the temporal validity of it. The original scale was made in the 1970s, and it was based on how 100 US undergraduates rated personality traits as more desirable for women or for men. More for men and they're masculine, more for women. What the fuck do you think? I'm sick and tired of spoon-feeding you this information. Think for yourself, fucking hell. Anyway, they did this again in 2001 with 400 undergraduates this time. Only 2 terms were actually conclusively said to be either masculine or feminine. These 2 terms were masculine and feminine. I'm not kidding. This kind of shows that people's attitudes have changed, and the BSRI isn't really valid anymore. Hang on, I've got a little bit more shit to spread on this. So most of the adjectives on the BSRI are socially desirable. And who's going to rate themselves highly on that scale? That's right, those losers who have high self-esteem. So that means that the BSRI might not actually be a measure of androgyny, but more self-esteem. So yeah, it's not really looking great for the BSRI. At least it's reliable. Test-retest reliability over a 4-week period ranged from 0.76 to 0.94, which is very high. It's just a shame that it's all bullshit. Right, so now that sex roles are out of the way, let's link that right into something that's completely unrelated: biological determination of sex and gender. Right, let's go over the very basics just in case we have some thick people in the audience. We humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, and one of these pairs determines our sex. XX for females and XY for males. However, sometimes things can fuck up. I won't go into how, because I don't know how it happens and I can't be asked to Google it. So a lot of these genetic syndromes affect the levels of hormones in the body, the main ones of these being testosterone and estrogen. Testosterone is more prevalent in males, and the most important form of it is dihydrotestosterone. This is what causes the male genitalia to differentiate, become a penis and testes rather than a vagina and ovaries. Hang on just a second. I'm sorry, I can't control it. I seriously don't understand why it's funny. They're clinical terms. You said penis! Are you fucking 7 years old? No, I'm 5 years old, actually. How? Oh. Either way, it's not funny, so just leave, please. Alright, fine. Sorry about that. So, dihydrotestosterone causes genitalia differentiation, but the main one we need to know is regular old testosterone classic. This is the one that promotes secondary sexual characteristics, so like body hair, body odour, penis enlargement. Unless you want to be the subject for my bit about castration later, I would suggest you leave now. Oh, okay. Again, sorry. Anyway, estrogen is another one you'll need to know. It's much more prevalent in females, and it controls secondary sexual characteristics exclusive to females, so wide hips, breasts, and regulating the menstrual cycle. Such a fucking child. Okay, now that we have the basics down, let's get into the interesting bit, where it goes wrong. So, one of the atypical chromosome patterns is Klinefelter syndrome, which is when a person has an extra chromosome, making them XXY. They're still a male, but the additional X chromosome means that their testosterone levels are significantly lower. This means that their secondary sexual characteristics tend to be less developed, and often they're infertile. It affects around about 1 in 1,000 men, which really isn't that small of a number when you think about it. If you're going to a football match in Southampton, where like 30,000 guys are all together, on average 32 of them will have Klinefelters. Well, I mean the reduced testosterone will probably stop them from watching football. Just a second. Who are you? Alright. Sorry about that. It's a notice from YouTube. Apparently that joke was too mean. Well, I mean, the video's already rendered and uploaded now, so it's a little late. Wait, I'm still editing this. Why can't I just cut it out?
Don't cut it out, it was funny.
It wasn't that funny, come on.
Oh, fuck you.
No, fuck. This is getting way too meta, let's just go back to normal.
Oh,
No, shut up, we're going back to normal now. So, we also have Turner syndrome, which is when a female doesn't have a second X chromosome. It affects around about 1 in 2,000, and it means that their ovaries become underdeveloped. Their intelligence is unaffected, but sometimes they can be abnormally verbally fluent. They don't menstruate, yay, but this means that they're also infertile. Boo. And now for my favourite. Not favourite, the one I find most interesting. Oh, fuck it, yeah, it's my favourite. The Batista family, who live in the Dominican Republic. They seem relatively normal, except for one major thing. Some of their daughters became sons at puberty. And no, I don't mean as like a gender transition kind of thing. They literally grew penises. Okay, I should probably clear this up a little bit. They weren't genetically female at any point. but a recessive gene mutation caused them to be unable to produce dihydrotestosterone. If you can remember to literally like a minute ago, that's the hormone that causes female genitals to differentiate into male ones. Up until puberty, the boys seemed to be girls. Once puberty hit and they were flooded with testosterone, this provoked the dihydrotestosterone to be produced, causing them to grow a penis. In the village they were raised, this is actually relatively common. They even have a name for these boys, Guevedoces, which literally means penis at 12. It's fucking crazy. So, yeah, obviously genetics are a major factor of sex, but what about gender? The thing is with these genetic disorders, it can often mean that children are mislabeled at birth. People who suffer from congenital androgen hyperplasia, which causes the clitoris to become incredibly enlarged to the point where it looks like a penis, may cause the female baby to be mislabeled as a male, and then raised as such. Some accept it and adjust to being males, but others don't. This is where it's not really clean-cut that it's biology. There has to be some societal aspect to it. Mislabeling of sex at birth and then raising the child as something they're not can lead to sincere problems later in life with mental health. The most prominent case of this being David Reimer. Right, I'm sorry, but this is a serious topic, so I'm not going to be making any jokes. David Reimer was born as Bruce, with his identical twin brother Brian, on August the 22nd, 1965. Soon after their birth, both boys were having trouble urinating. They were diagnosed with phimosis, which caused the foreskin to be unable to be pulled back past the glands. Because of this, they needed to be circumcised. Bruce was the first of the twins to have this procedure done, and the doctors used an unconventional method, electrocauterization. This meant using electricity to perform the procedure, but then a horrible accident occurred. Bruce's penis was burned beyond surgical repair. Brian's procedure was then aborted, and in a sick twist of fate, the phimosis ended up clearing without any surgery. Bruce's parents were obviously concerned about his future. They had no reason to expect this, so in their desperation, they contacted a psychologist with an expertise in gender that they had seen on television, John Money. Here we go. John Money suggested that Bruce should be raised as a girl. He and physicians working with Bruce told the parents that constructing a penis would be impossible, but a functional vagina would be viable. Of course, this was an absolutely perfect situation for Money. As an identical twin, Bruce would be only affected by social constructs when it came to his gender identity. Money's theory of gender neutrality relied on this, so Bruce was invaluable to him. Now, I wouldn't accuse him of misinforming the Reimers for his own benefit, but it sure is a coincidence. Anyway, the Reimers followed Money's advice, and at 22 months, Bruce was subjected to a bilateral orchidectomy, or as it's more commonly known, a castration. Bruce was reassigned to become a female, and was raised as Brenda. Now, I'd really like to tell you that everything was fine after this, but I can't. These claims don't have any proof backing them up, so I won't make any judgment. But in adulthood, Reimer claimed that Money had forced him into sexual positions with his brother during their annual consultations. He reported that Money would also take pictures of these acts, as well as the children's genitals. These claims would provide reason for the mental health problems both boys suffered later in life. Despite the efforts of Money and her parents, Brenda was incredibly unhappy living as a female. She was bullied and derided throughout childhood, gaining the nickname Cave Woman due to her appearance. Brenda began suffering from suicidal depression, and she directly told her parents that she would kill herself if they took her to see Money again. Listening to advice from Brenda's endocrinologist and psychiatrist, the Reimers finally told both of the twins the truth about Brenda. Brenda was elated and assumed the male identity that he was known for the rest of his life, David. Sadly, David's brother Brian didn't take the news well. Already suffering from mental health problems, his condition deteriorated until the point where he developed schizophrenia. Brian took his life on July the 1st, 2002, with an overdose of antidepressants. The death of his brother hit David incredibly hard. He had a lifelong tenuous relationship with his parents, and, despite being happily married for quite a while, his relationship with his wife began to deteriorate. David began to lose hope. 2 days after his wife told him that she wanted to separate, David drove into a grocery store parking lot and shot himself on the head with a sawed-off shotgun. He was 38. I know I have no connection to these people, and I have no idea how I would personally react with such a circumstance at that time especially, but I hope you can understand why I do not respect John Money in any way. The fact that he encouraged these people to go through with this procedure just for the sake of his own study, it's what makes me despise him. Right, I'm sorry, that was a little bit heavy. I'll try and alleviate it a little bit. Do you need my help? No, God, no. Oh, come on, I have jokes. So, two trannies walk into a bar. I will fucking castrate you. Alright, fine, you could have just said no. I did say okay, never mind. Right, fun subject. Oh, I've got it. I'll just shit on the psychodynamic approach. Good old Freud, back on his bullshit. So we have the number one theory of Freud, the Oedipus complex, also known as Freud can't cope with the fact that he wants to fuck his mum, so he just says that everybody wants to. So according to Freud, every boy is deeply attracted to their mothers during the phallic stage of development. The boys then become scared that their father will discover this attraction, believing he'll castrate them if he finds out. It's just absolute bullshit, basically. Anyway, this fear of castration causes the boys to reject their mothers and identify with their fathers, copying their masculine behaviours and developing the male identity. But what did Freud think about the female identity? Sorry, this is Freud we're talking about. He doesn't give a shit about females. But after he died, some of the people who believe his bollocks came up with their own ideas, main one being the Electra complex, which is basically the female flavour of the Oedipus complex. So this happens in the phallic stage as well. The girl is attracted to her father and then believes that her mum is going to cut out her ovaries. I'm kidding, it's not really like that. She's just worried that she's going to lose her mum's love. So because of this, she rejects her father and then mimics her mother. So what's the evidence in support of this theory? Well, Freud believed that a lack of a father figure would result in a weaker sense of gender identity in boys. And sure enough, a study by Riekers and Moray in 1990 showed that boys without a father figure were more likely to have gender disturbances later in life. So, what else? Oh, there's nothing else. Let's get to the stuff against it. So Freud claimed that a lack of a father figure wasn't just causing boys to have a weaker sense of gender identity, but it was also causing them to turn homosexual. I guess this is because without a father figure, they can continue to have sexual thoughts about their mother and... Wait, no, that doesn't make any sense. It's almost like this theory is complete bullshit. Anyway, in recent years, the numbers of single-parent families have increased significantly, but the increase of number of homosexuals in the population hasn't increased anywhere near as much. Also, the fact that he thought that homosexuality and gender disturbances were abnormal and diseases that were in need of curing is a little bit dickish. But now we come to the reason that I fucking despise the psychodynamic approach. Almost everything Freud says relies on the existence of the unconscious part of the brain, which conveniently can't be detected or proven to exist. But this means that we have to prove that it doesn't exist, so their whole argument is, you can't prove me wrong. This is known as the fallacy of ignorance, where you shift the burden of proof from the person proposing the theory onto the person arguing against the theory. And I swear to Lucifer, whenever someone does this, I want to start flipping tables. If you're proposing something, you should provide evidence that you're right, for fuck's sake. You can't say, prove me wrong is the most fucking cop-out argument you can have. You're meant to be a fucking scientist, Freud. How do you not... Okay, I'm sorry about that. Let's have an approach that's a little less bullshit now, please. So with the cognitive approach, the biggest theory is Kohlberg's, which suggests that between the ages of 2 and 6, we go through 3 distinct stages of knowledge when it comes to learning about gender. So the first of these stages is gender labelling, which is from the ages 2 to around about 3. These ages are a little bit flexible, so these are kind of just guidelines really. Anyway, in the labelling stage, the children can label themselves and others as male or female. The thing is, it's only based on outward appearance, so men with long hair and women with short hair are thought to be the opposite gender to what they actually are. Then the next stage is gender stability from around about 4 years onward. They recognise that boys turn into men and girls turn into women as they grow up, but they're still swayed by outward appearances. This stops on the next stage, gender consistency. Children recognise that gender stays consistent across situations. When a boy puts on a wig, he doesn't become a girl. Gender is now seen as fixed instead of fluid.
By far the worst thing that happens in childhood.
Oh, you waited a while before speaking up.
I couldn't stand by as you said that gender is solid and can't...
Shut up or fuck off, ideally both in either order.
Fine.
Right, let's get back on topic. Kohlberg's theory is good at describing how children learn to change their views on gender, but it doesn't explain why they change. This is covered a little better with the gender schema theory by Martin Halverson in 1981. So I should probably cover the very basics for those who don't know what a schema is.
I saw you googling the definition before you wrote that.
Piss off. So it's the representation of a theory in the form of a model. At a young age, around about 2 according to Martin and Halverson, children learn the very basics of boys and girls being 2 separate groups. I mean, yeah, it's pretty simple, but give them a break, they're probably still pissing the bed at this point. The kids, not Martin and Halverson. These schemas are formed through their interactions with other kids, their parents, their teachers. You get the picture, it's their surroundings. You've got stuff like the kind of clothes that each gender should wear, what kind of toys they should play with, how much less money they should get, how far apart they're allowed to spread their legs on public transport, all that jazz. Boys learn to act like boys and girls learn to act like girls, all through in-group, out-group learning. So let's have an example, and I'm going to use a boy for this one because I'm a sexist pig who doesn't want to give women roles in this video.
Excuse me?
Oh, fuck off. So for this kid, boys are the in-group and girls are the out-group. Once the boy begins to identify with the group, he'll positively evaluate them and negatively evaluate the out-group. Hence, boys rule, girls drool becomes a thing. It helps self-esteem to believe that you're part of the best group, which is why you get people believing that their football team is the best, that their country is the best, and that Aryans are the master race. Okay, maybe that's a little bit far. These evaluations are strengthened when the boy sees people being punished for deviating from the norm or engaging in out-group activities. So if he sees one of his male classmates wearing a tutu at playtime and then the boy gets viciously beaten into a pulp, the boy will learn that it's probably not the best idea to wear girl clothes. It's this kind of conditioning that will turn the boy into a strapping young lad ready to oppress women when he's older.
Actually...
Oh, you can fuck off too. There's actually a bit of evidence for this theory. The main one being Martin Halverson's study at the time, where kids were shown pictures of children doing both stereotypical and counter-stereotypical things for their gender. When asked, they distorted their memory to fit in with their schemas. Okay, we're on the home stretch now. The main event, the big one, the one that's going to infuriate both sides of the egotistical twat spectrum, atypical gender development, or more specifically, the condition gender identity disorder, or GID. So this is different to the intersex conditions that I was talking about before in the biological part. With this, it's a psychiatric condition which causes people to be uncomfortable with the gender that they were born in. Sometimes it's called gender dysphoria, or being transgender, or attention seeking if you're a cunt who doesn't understand that psychiatric conditions are a thing. So there are a bunch of different explanations of this. When it comes to biology, it's genetics to brain composition to sometimes even pesticides. For instance, one study by Hare et al. In 2009 found a trend in the DNA of male to female transgender people showed that they were more likely to have a longer version of the androgen receptor gene, which means the testosterone had its action reduced, possibly causing the brain to become undermasculinized in the womb. Another is the brain sex theory, and no, I don't mean those twats who say they're sapiosexual. Studies have found a trend in brains where males have a larger BSTC section of their brains in the thalamus. This is relevant because a couple of Dutch studies found transsexuals had a BSTC that was more similar to the gender which they identified rather than their sex. But it's not as easy as that, I'm afraid. There's a major challenge to the theory that this BSTC is crucial to GID arising, which is that this differentiation BSTC size between men and women only occurs in adulthood. The vast majority of transsexuals say that their dysphoria began years before reaching adulthood. Also, hormone therapy causes changes in BSTC size, and individuals in the Dutch studies had already been receiving hormone therapy before the study was conducted. So, yeah, just like the BSRI, it looks like this theory is bullshit. However, one theory that doesn't seem to be bullshit is crosswiring problems, proposed by Ramachandran. I rather like this one. Ramachandran suggested that gender dysphoria is like an innate version of the phantom limb syndrome, where people who have a limb amputated will report that they still feel things from the limb, like itches. Studies show that the part of the brain that used to get input from the limb gains connections with a different part of the body, like the cheek, so the brain thinks that the limb is still there. But how does this apply to gender? Well, good old Ramachandran proposed that something similar happens with transsexuals. Their brains get crosswired, so male to female transsexuals believe they shouldn't have a penis, whereas female to male transsexuals experience a phantom penis. 2/3 of female to male transsexuals reported having these phantom penises from childhood onward, even experiencing phantom erections. There's even more evidence too, this time for male to female transsexuals. Normal patients who had their penis amputated reported sensations of a phantom penis around about 60% of the time, but male to female patients that had theirs amputated only reported it around about 30% of the time. This heavily suggests that these people didn't have any wiring to penis representation in the first place. Honestly, I've never found a lack of a penis so interesting since my last trip to Thailand. Then we have the mild possibility that external forces acting upon babies in utero cause the problems. The pesticide DDT contains estrogen, which may cause male children whose mothers were exposed to the pesticide before giving birth to have lower testosterone, and therefore become more feminized. Vrugdenhill et al. In 2002 showed that boys born from women exposed to these dioxins displayed more feminine play. This is a little though, and far from actual proof. Then we have the social explanations of GID, and some of these become dangerously close to being Freudian, so I'll try and control myself. So Stroller in 1975 proposed that individuals diagnosed with GID tended to display overly close mother-son relationships. This led to greater female identification and then confused gender identity. Something similar was proposed for female-to-male transsexuals, except not really similar at all. Fuck it. Zucker proposed in 2004 that female-to-male transsexuals only identify as males because of severe paternal rejection during childhood. This means that unconsciously... Calm down. They think that they'll gain acceptance from their father if they become male. There is actually some support for this. In 1995, Zucker studied 115 boys with concerns about their gender identity, along with their mothers. Of the boys actually diagnosed with GID, 64% also had separation anxiety, whereas only 38% of the boys with symptoms that were subclinical did. However, the claim that these mental health issues come hand in hand with GID aren't exactly right. Kohl et al. In 1997 studied 435 individuals with GID and found the number of psychiatric conditions displayed was no greater than that of the regular population. Right, so I believe that's everything. We've covered sex roles, androgyny, biological, psychological, and cognitive explanations of gender development. I spent way too long on a really depressing story. I called a respected approach to psychology bullshit because I don't agree with it because I'm an arrogant arsehole. And then we covered the actual important part of gender, atypical gender development. So yeah, all done. Right, well, I'm going on Twitter to laugh at those knobs who pray to Ben Shapiro like some god of logic. Fucking idiots. See you later. Or not. I'm not your friend, I'm just a twat who makes YouTube videos.